All existing laws, regulations, orders, and official instructions remain in force, wherever applicable, until either modified or abrogated by the federal military government.
Will there be press censorship during this regime?
I do not think that I should start off with press censorship. But I may impose censorship if it became necessary. My main concern is to restore law and order as soon as possible.
Following the failure of the January 15, 1966 coup by the self-proclaimed revolutionary officers, the domino effect on the country was catastrophic, especially with regards to military camaraderie and tribal sentiments. The failed coup came to be known as an Igbo coup because of the composition of officers that took part in the coup and the prejudicial propaganda that followed. The appointment of Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, another Igbo, as military head of state only worsened the situation. Fears of ethnic domination was rife, especially in northern Nigeria, and the failure of General Ironsi to promptly try the coup plotters and quell the rumors only exacerbated the situation. With the palpable tension in the country, it was only a matter of time before violence would erupt, and the Abeokuta garrison was a catalyst for what would come to be known as the July Revenge Coup. The commanding officer of the Abeokuta garrison was Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Okonwezi. He had previously been the second in command of the 1st Battalion in Enugu, but was posted to Abeokuta following the January coup. Late on the night of July 28, Okonwezi became concerned by reports he had received which indicated that another coup was imminent. Okonwezi had received a tip from Army headquarters warning him of a coup that night. To avoid a repeat of the killing that had occurred in January, Okonwezi instructed Lieutenant Abdullahi Maman to wake up the officers and call the meeting in the officers' mess. Contrary to popular myth which states that Okonwezi invited only Igbo soldiers to the meeting, the officers who attended have vouched that all officers, regardless of ethnic or regional origin, were invited. Some of the attendees included northern officers such as Lieutenant D.S. Abubakar, I.S. Umar, and Gabriel Idoku. The two most senior northern officers in Abeokuta, Captains Mohammed Rimawa and Domkat Bali, were absent from the meeting as they had gone out to the Abeokuta Recreation Club. Lieutenant Roland Obuna had also gone out to celebrate his purchase of a new car. According to the officers attending the meeting, Okonwezi informed them that Anwuna had alerted him of an impending coup. Okonwezi urged any officer with information to come forward and promised that he would not report anyone for doing so. Okonwezi added that he did not want a repeat of the January shootings and that the best course of action would be to issue arms and ammunition to the soldiers in his units so they could defend themselves if a coup began. In response to Okonwezi's orders, an Igbo NCO went round waking up the other soldiers with instructions for them to go and collect arms. The fact that that NCO was Igbo did not help to calm the fear of northern soldiers. In the highly tense and emotional atmosphere, any unfounded rumor, minor misunderstanding, or miscommunication was likely to spark violence. This was particularly so at Abeokuta, which had several of the most embittered conspirators such as Lieutenants Pam Mwadokon and I.S. Umar. Rather than calm tempers and nerves, the meeting further agitated northern NCOs who were not inside the mess. Some of the NCOs had already planned a mutiny and assumed that the meeting with Okonwezi was discussing plans to eliminate them. A group of them decided that Okonwezi's order was a chance to strike first against their Igbo colleagues. This group included Corporal John Shagaya and Lieutenant Pam of Reki Squadron. Pam was the duty officer and Shagaya was an instructor in communications, gunnery, and driving and maintenance. They decided to preemptively get organized and armed. Two Bachama soldiers in the units Sergeant Sabu Kwali and Corporal May Samari Maje had a pivotal conversation in their native tongue. The Bachamas, an ethnic group renowned for their warrior tradition and fighting capabilities. Kwale told Maje to ensure the weapons were issued to Northerners only. Another Northern soldier in the unit, Inua Sara, procured other Northern soldiers to man the armory and to assist the selective distribution of weapons to Northern soldiers only. While Okonweze continued to address the meeting in the officers' mess, Northern NCOs led by Sergeant Sabu Kwali and Corporal Maje started advancing towards the mess. The officers in the mess initially thought the NCOs were coming in to receive instructions and did not realize they were about to become eyewitnesses to a crime scene. Led by Kwale and Maje, the Northern soldiers stormed into the officers' mess and shot dead Lieutenant Colonel Okonweze and the commander of the Recce Squadron in Abeokuta, Major John Obienu. Obienu had been billed to appear in the January Major's coup but lost his nerve on the D-Day and failed to show up. As will be shown later in this book, it was not the last prominent act of revolt by Sergeant Sabu Kwali. Kwale was never punished for shooting Okonweze and Obienu. Years later, even his fellow Northern soldiers would regret their failure to take punitive actions against him. After the shooting of Okonweze and Obienu, all hell broke loose as soldiers started running for cover in all directions. Initially, no one was sure which side was responsible for the shooting. Lieutenant Orok was out when the shooting started. He returned to find the garrison in confusion. He was also shot dead after driving into the garrison and stumbling on the commotion occurring. Shortly afterwards, Captain Domkat Bali returned from his outing with Captain Rimawa and was shocked to discover the corpses of Okonweze, Obienu, and Orok. Bali and Rimawa stumbled upon Obienu's bullet-riddled corpse, still sitting in a chair inside the officers' mess. Rimawa and Bali got changed into full battle attire and tried to restrain the NCOs. However, not even the presence of Northern officers such as Rimawa and Bali could restrain the rage of some of the NCOs. Second Lieutenant Olaniyan was shot dead in the presence of Captain Bali, who had promised him safe passage. As Bali was escorting him, Olaniyan was shot dead by other Northern troops and died calling out Bali's name. Now in control of the Abeokuta garrison, Northern soldiers conducted a door-to-door search for Igbo soldiers. When found, Igbo soldiers were shot and their bodies dumped into a vehicle parked near one of the officers' quarters. They also mounted roadblocks on main roads to and from Abeokuta. Initial press reports were confused and many outlets reported the shootings as the beginning of another coup by Igbo soldiers against Aguiyi Ironsi. The Northern officers at Abeokuta delegated their most senior member, Captain Mohammed Ramawa, to telephone Lieutenant Colonel Gowon and inform him of what had happened. For the second time in 6 months, an army mutiny began in Abeokuta and spread to other cities. And also for the second time in 6 months, Rimawa found himself about to become an accomplice in a coup. During the January coup, he had provided vehicles to Captain Nwobosi, unaware that Nwobosi would use those vehicles to drive to Ibadan and attack Chief Akintola. This time round, he fully supported the coup. According to Lieutenant D.S. Abubakar, the Abeokuta officers feared that they would be isolated, arrested, and imprisoned. They resolved to fight on rather than let that happen. Now armed with the news of the Abeokuta mutiny, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon started phoning the various army formations around the country and warning them to be on alert. However, his call to other army installations simply spurred Northern soldiers in those units into action. In Ibadan, Aguiyi Ironsi received a telephone call from the Commissioner of Police, Joseph Adiola, in the early hours of Friday 29 July, informing him of the mutiny at Abeokuta and the murder of Okonweze, Obienu, and Orok. Aguiyi Ironsi's host Fajuri suggested that they should leave State House in Ibadan, but Aguiyi Ironsi would have none of it. From Abeokuta, Lieutenant Ogbonna also made more panicky calls to other military units, including the 4th Battalion in Ibadan. His call was answered by the battalion's adjutant, Lieutenant Garba Dada, who was also one of the core Northern conspirators. Dada recognized Ogbonna's voice as the two trained together as cadets. Ogbonna's distress call merely served as a rallying alert for other Northern troops, who up till now were unaware that the coup had begun. Everything was going the Northerners' way. After the call from Ogbonna, Dada woke up Major Danjuma and updated him. Danjuma and Dada then phoned the Abeokuta garrison to get more information on what had happened. This time, Dada spoke to a northern officer in Abeokuta, Lieutenant Pam Mwadkong, who confirmed the murders at Abeokuta and urged Dada to commence the coup in Ibadan, since they had liquidated the Igbo soldiers in Abeokuta and liberated the garrison. Emboldened by the outcome in Abeokuta, approximately 24 northern troops under the command of the lean, gangling Major TY Danjuma turned up at the Ibadan State House. Danjuma was the principal staff officer at Army headquarters in Lagos and a member of Aguiyi Ironsi's entourage during his tour. Danjuma asked all the guards on duty to line up. He disarmed, then ordered all the Igbo guards to leave, but picked out northern guards to remain. After being briefed by Danjuma, the northern guards switched sides and joined him and the troops he had brought along with him. The northern guards, now reinforced by other soldiers brought by Danjuma, surrounded State House. According to Danjuma, by sheer coincidence, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon placed a call to State House at that very moment. The call connected to a telephone immediately adjacent to Danjuma's location. Danjuma picked up the receiver and, after identifying himself to Gowon, informed Gowon of his plan to capture Aguiyi Ironsi.
Hello?
Yes?
I want to speak to the brigade commander. I want to speak to Colonel Njoku.
May I know who is speaking?
My name is Gowon. Yakubu Gowon.
Ranka Dede, this is Yakubu Danjuma.
Yakubu, what are you doing there? Where are you?
I am in the State House, sir.
Where is the brigade commander?
He is not around.
Have you heard what happened in Abeokuta?
Yes, I heard, sir. That is why I am here. We are about to arrest the Supreme Commander. The alternative is that the Igbo boys who carried out the January coup will be released. Tit for tat, since we killed their own officer.
Good Lord. Can you do it?
Yes, sir. We have the place surrounded, sir.
Alright. But for goodness sake, we have had enough bloodshed. There must be no bloodshed.
We are only here to arrest him, sir. There will be no bloodshed.
Good.
Danjuma's chance interception of a telephone call intended for Aguiyi Ironsi was one of the many coincidences and slices of good fortune that worked in the northern soldiers' favor. Had that call been connected to Aguiyi Ironsi, events may have taken a dramatically different turn. News of the Abeokuta killings had also reached Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu. Around 4 a.m., he called Lieutenant Colonel Ejo and passed on the news. Around 5 a.m., Aguiyi Ironsi and his fellow occupants inside State House heard gunfire outside. This was actually an accidental discharge by Danjuma's men. The commander of 2 Brigade, Lieutenant Colonel Hilary Njoku, was summoned from a guest house adjacent to the State House. When he arrived, he found Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajri alert and nervously pacing up and down the living room floor. Njoku was informed of the murder of Okonweze, Obienu, and Orok, and was instructed to travel to Lagos and organize the suppression of the mutiny from there. Before Njoku departed, he telephoned the commander of the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Akahan. Akahan was already aware of events at Abeokuta, but informed Njoku that nothing untoward was occurring in his unit and that he was reluctant to alert his men as he felt it would be dangerous to get them further agitated. The military governor of the Midwest, Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo, also telephoned Akahan and asked him for an update on the situation in Ibadan and to check on Aguiyi Ironsi's condition. Akahan again maintained that nothing unusual was happening and that his unit was quiet. In fact, men from Akahan's unit were neck deep in the plot, and many of them were among the soldiers that had surrounded Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajri at State House, including Lieutenants Abdullah Ishaleng, Garba Dada, Mohammed Haladu, and James Onoja. According to Danjuma, the other soldiers with him included an NTO that later retired as a brigadier, and another soldier that was later killed during the Nigerian Civil War. As Njoku was leaving State House, he was recognized by the northern troops outside and they opened fire on him. Njoku was shot in the thigh but managed to escape. At this point, the 4th Battalion duty officer, Lieutenant James Onoja, one of the northern soldiers with Danjuma, feared that the coup was going to fail and fled all the way to northern region. Danjuma's men searched the grounds for Njoku but were unable to locate him. When Njoku's wife Rose rang State House to find out what was going on, her call was answered by Aguiyi Ironsi, who grimly informed her that her husband had departed a few minutes earlier and that gunshots were heard not long after his departure. Njoku escaped for a second time when some northern soldiers went looking for him at a hospital where he sought medical treatment for the gunshot wounds he sustained. Njoku managed to escape his pursuers again and was eventually smuggled to the eastern region. An increasingly isolated Aguiyi Ironsi made a flurry of telephone calls to army formations around the country and spoke to many officers to advise them of his predicament. He telephoned to brigade headquarters in Lagos and spoke to the Deputy Assistant Adjutant and Quartermaster General, Major Frank Obioha, and unsuccessfully attempted to have a helicopter sent to rescue him. He also telephoned the 1st Brigade headquarters in Kaduna and ominously informed the Brigade Major Samuel Ogbemudia that all is not well. However, the 1 Brigade in Kaduna, hundreds of miles away from Ibadan and therefore unlikely to be of immediate assistance to Aguiyi Ironsi. Aguiyi Ironsi's panic-stricken wife also spoke to her husband and to Lieutenant Colonel Njoku's wife, Rose. The two wives wept as they realized the danger their husbands were in. Back at State House Ibadan, aides were quietly being arrested by the now mutinous guards. The detainees included the Secretary to the National Military Government, Mr. S.O. Way, Staff Sergeant Godwin Madu, Njoku's driver, and Major Thomas of the Medical Corps. Having been in position outside the State House for several hours, the NTOs under Danjuma grew increasingly nervous, impatient, and were urging him to attack the building and destroy it with a high-caliber weapon. They were concerned about the apocryphal stories about Aguiyi Ironsi and feared that he could use Charlie to make himself disappear from the building and appear at a different location where he could neutralize them. The myths about Aguiyi Ironsi's invisibility were reinforced by his suppression of the Major's coup in January. Lieutenant Abdullahi Sheleng was on hand to urge the NTOs to continue to cooperate with Danjuma. Danjuma had thus far resisted and contented himself with quietly arresting people that were seen coming out of State House. Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajuyi set out aides from the State House to appraise what was going on outside, not realizing that some of the men they were sending out and to whom they entrusted their safety were in league with the mutineers. Being privy to the coup plot, these men did not alert Fajuyi and Aguiyi Ironsi of the danger they were in. Fajuyi's ADC, Lieutenant Umar, was sent out to find out what was going on. He went outside and simply switched sides, joining Danjuma's troops. He returned to falsely inform the State House occupants that all was well. Aguiyi Ironsi's Air Force ADC, Lieutenant Andrew Nwako, also went outside to see what was going on. He was told by Major Danjuma, who asked to see Aguiyi Ironsi. Danjuma and Nwako knew each other personally. According to Nwako, Danjuma pretended he did not know what was happening. While I was trying to go back, one sergeant from Benue almost shot me, but Danjuma stopped him and spoke to him in Hausa. Danjuma later told me that he would like to see Ironsi so that he could tell them what to do. Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajuyi were becoming increasingly concerned. Some of the aides they sent to investigate had simply disappeared and not returned. After some time, Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi also came outside to see what was taking Nwako so long. At this point, Danjuma ordered the arrest of Fajuyi and Nwako. According to Danjuma, the following verbal exchange took place between he and Fajuyi. Danjuma: Sir, you are under arrest. Raise your hands. Fajuyi: What do you want? Danjuma: I want the Supreme Commander. Fajuyi: Promise me that no harm will come to him. Fajuyi agreed to take Danjuma to see Aguiyi Ironsi after eliciting an assurance from Danjuma that Aguiyi Ironsi would come to no harm. According to Danjuma, he overruled a chorus of objections from the NTOs who did not want Fajuyi to be allowed to go back inside. The NTOs agreed only after approximately half a dozen of them were allowed to enter with Fajuyi and Danjuma. While these conversations went on outside, upstairs inside State House, Aguiyi Ironsi woke up his young son Thomas, who was visiting him from England during his school holidays. Aguiyi Ironsi gave Thomas instructions to find his way back to Lagos, embraced and bade farewell to him, then hid him inside a wardrobe. Fajuyi's younger brother was also hidden in the house as the mutineers entered. Escorted by the now hostage Fajuyi, Danjuma and his troops entered State House. Danjuma walked behind Fajuyi with a grenade in his hand, with the pin removed. Danjuma originally brought the grenade as insurance in case the operation failed and he needed to kill himself. They met 2 police guards on the staircase. The outgunned guards were told to drop their weapons and join the other detainees. They complied. Danjuma and his men went up to the first floor and entered the State House living room where Aguiyi Ironsi was. Danjuma saluted Aguiyi Ironsi and Lieutenant Titus Newman snatched the ever-present crocodile mascot, Charlie, away from him. The stories of how the mascot rendered Aguiyi Ironsi impervious to physical harm were obviously playing on their minds. Over the years, Danjuma has given 2 separate but broadly consistent accounts of the tense verbal exchange that ensued between him and Aguiyi Ironsi. Ironsi: young man. Danjuma: sir, you are under arrest. Ironsi: what is the matter? Danjuma: the matter is you, sir. You told us in January, when we supported you to quell the mutiny, that all the dissident elements that took part in the mutiny will be court-martialed. It is now July. You have done nothing. You kept these boys in prison, and the rumors are now that they will be released because they are national heroes. Ironsi: look, what do you mean? It is not true. Danjuma: you are lying. You have been fooling us. You told us that they would be tried. This is July and nothing has been done. You will answer for your actions. As Danjuma and Aguiyi Ironsi argued, Aguiyi Ironsi's Air Force ADC Lieutenant Nwako added a few choice words of his own, and Fajuyi repeatedly reminded Danjuma of the assurance of safety he had given. Nwako still had his pistol but did not use it, as there were half a dozen northern soldiers in the room armed with automatic weapons and one with a grenade. According to Nwako, it was immediately after they arrested Ironsi that they turned violent. Aguiyi Ironsi's Army ADC Lieutenant Sani Bello was also accosted. As a northerner, he was suspected of being a traitor for serving as Aguiyi Ironsi's Army ADC. Aguiyi Ironsi, Fajuyi, Nwako, and Bello were led out with their hands tied behind their backs with telephone wire. Aguiyi Ironsi had first his Major General pips and then his shirt ripped off. This may have been a symbolic attempt to strip him of his authority. At this point, the protagonists' accounts diverge. The most detailed account of what happened at Ibadan emerged from Danjuma. Lieutenant Nwako and the Eastern Region publication January 15th, before and after. Danjuma claims that one of the NCOs tapped him on the shoulder with a rifle and together with the NCOs and other junior officers snatched Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajuyi away from him. According to Danjuma, the NCOs lost patience with him for not ordering Aguiyi Ironsi's summary elimination and were frightened that unless he was immediately neutralized, Aguiyi Ironsi might use juju to disappear before their very eyes. The captives were loaded into a jeep and driven off in a convoy that included 2 other vehicles. The Eastern Region's account claimed that Danjuma was in one of the convoy vehicles, but at an intersection waved the other vehicles on and drove off separately for the barracks. The soldiers who remained in the convoy and took Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajuyi to their final destination included Lieutenants William Walbe, Garba Dada, Titus Newman, Company Sergeant Major Usaini Fege, Warrant Officer I. Bako, and a soldier from Maiduguri called Sergeant Tijani. Other northern soldiers were present too. The captives were stripped down to their trousers, whipped and badly beaten. Aguiyi Ironsi and Fajuyi took the brunt of the beatings. As the beatings continued, the captors interrogated Aguiyi Ironsi about his knowledge of the January coup and the whereabouts of the men who had been killed in January. Some of the northern soldiers accused Aguiyi Ironsi of knowing the whereabouts of Brigadier Mai Malari, whom they erroneously believed was still alive. After denying any involvement in the January coup, Aguiyi Ironsi switched off and endured the blows that were being rained down on him in silence and refused to admit complicity in the January coup or to answer further questions that were being fired at him by the junior officers. As an old school soldier, he showed immense courage in the circumstances and probably felt that it would be dishonorable for him as the head of the armed forces to allow himself to be interrogated by subordinates like NCOs, even at the risk of saving his own life. 2 of the interrogators began arguing among themselves about the fate of the captives. One argued that all captives were to be shot, and another maintained that they had not been instructed to kill all captives. The latter prevailed. However, Aguiyi Ironsi and Faji were so badly beaten and wounded they could hardly stand. They were led out into the bush where they were killed by machine gun fire. Aguiyi Ironsi's Air Force ADC, Lieutenant Nwako, managed to escape as his captors' attention was focused on Aguiyi Ironsi and Faji. Lieutenant Nwako escaped due to a pre-existing gentleman's agreement he had with his fellow ADC, Lieutenant Sani Bello. The two men had previously agreed that whomever of them came out on top during the counter-coup should save the life of the other. Despite the murders of Aguiyi Ironsi and Faji, Bello honored the gentleman's agreement. While the mutineers' attention was focused on Aguiyi Ironsi and Faji, Bello told Nwako to flee. Bello himself also survived the ordeal and later became a military governor. There are different schools of thought regarding Danjuma's role. Danjuma's account is true. Unfortunately, most of the people who can corroborate or dispute it are dead. Is the account in January 15 before and after reliable? Can it be believed, given that it was released during a propaganda war? The common denominator in both accounts is that Danjuma was not present when Aguiyi Ironsi and Faji were killed.